Production of North Carolina People is made possible by a grant from Wachovia Bank, a symbol of strength, stability, and service for over a century.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You know, North Carolina has many of its sons and daughters who have done so well in the news divisions of various networks and newspapers and media fields all over the nation. And we've had the pleasure of having you meet some of them on North Carolina People, and we have another one here this evening, one of the luminaries, Duke University, a native of our state, Charlie Rose, who was CBS News Night Watch man in Washington for 6.5 years, and many other wonderful things you've done, Charles.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You and I have known each other for a long, long time. And I must say that at least I spent one summer school before I entered Duke at UNC. I don't know what happened, but I was at Carolina for at least 2 months.
Well, fine. But we're awfully proud. All citizens are proud of you with your Peabody Award, your Emmy Award, and all that you've achieved and done so well. Bob Langford wrote a piece about you in the News and Observer not so long ago, and he said that you took great care to put 3 baseballs up on the mantle, Ted Williams, Pete Rose, and Tommy Lasorda.
Yeah.
Does that mean you really wanted to be a baseball player?
Oh, I would have loved it, you know. I would much rather have been a pro basketball player, but I didn't have the skill, nor the skill to be a baseball player. But one of the joys of doing Night Watch for me, the CBS broadcast, is every spring I'd head for spring training. And one of the great joys of being there, you meet not only the contemporary players, but legends like Ted Williams. And Ted Williams walked up one day, and he's a fisherman, and he would get up early in the morning, so he knew me. And I thought I had died and gone to heaven when Ted Williams says to me, "I'm a big fan of yours." I said, this is it. I mean, I can just die now, and I'm a happy man.
Yeah, well, that's a great, you really, Frank McGuire looked at you once to play basketball, didn't
Not very long, though. You know, I think what it was is that
a great story.
Henderson would play over Chapel Hill, and Chapel and Henderson were in the same conference, and I think occasionally he would come over, and somebody came with me at halftime and said, "I'm sitting behind Frank McGuire," and I asked him what he was looking at, and he said, "Well, you know, I was thought I'd take a look at Charlie Rose." Well, I mean, there was no hope. There never was any hope that I would make that team. I mean, my first great moment in sports was the 1957 team. And watching Carolina go all the way. And this year it was a great delight for me to watch my alma mater go all the way.
And they were a great group of young men. They really were. Charles, all those years, CBS News and that wonderful Night Watch program, and here you are back in Granville County out on the farm. What about this transition?
That's what my friends say. What are you doing out there?
Can you stand silence out there?
No, not only can I stand it, I've learned to love it.
Isn't it wonderful?
It is so satisfying, you know, to be able to drive up to your own farm and reach down and grab a piece of soil and say, you know, this is mine, in a sense of being connected to it, and watch deer run across the front and look out into the pond, and there's geese on the pond, and to look out across the hills and see horses across the hills that belong to my neighbor, and cattle on the farm, and see the soil turned up. I can get used to it real easy.
You can hear them in the morning too.
Yes, and the birds sing.
That's
and I've got a lot of bullfrogs that are croaking a lot now. So it's a joy, and it's different. I mean, after leaving North Carolina after Duke and going to New York and ending up with Bill Moyers in public television and having an opportunity to play a part in this wonderful business that you kind of avocationally have entered, I find it really satisfying to come back and to do things that I don't, I told Bill the other day, it's really nice here. I just got some horses to watch the birth and, and the joy of being connected to things that I haven't been connected to for a long time.
And you need that connection periodically.
You bet. It keeps you also gives you a realization for those of us who are communicators and connected to at least the dialogue and the communication of ideas in America. It gives you a sense to touch base with people who are experiencing life in a different way than you are, and listening to them is probably an experience that most journalists would do well to engage in.
You know, Charlie, I've often thought that if every major network interviewer had that experience periodically, just meeting that fellow out at the filling station.
Yeah, you bet.
Or the clerk in the courthouse or somewhere, to learn what real America, to renew what he knew real America to be.
You know what it does for me? Not only do you understand what they believe and feel, but you're surprised. You find out that you thought their views or their ideas might be here, but they're here. That, number one. And number two, because of the pervasive impact of television and CNN and public television, people are really informed up to the date, up to the moment, regardless of where you go. You go into these filling stations these days, and each of them has a television tuned in to CNN.
That's right. And that's an informed public.
You bet.
When did this connection with Bill Moyers develop after you left you?
Oh, I married a Carolina lady, and we went to New York to find our way, and she met Bill first. And she was doing some work for the BBC and making some documentaries, and I think mentioned to Bill that I was interested in communication, and he basically said, tell him to call me up and let's have lunch. And I went over to see him. And during that conversation, he said to me, and I was a lawyer with no real experience in television, as you know, and I'm still learning, as you know, too. And I went to see him, and halfway through the conversation, he said, how would you like to come work for me? I sort of said something modestly like, well, let me think it over.
Yeah.
And my heart said, I'll take about 2 seconds to decide.
That was a very growing experience, was it not?
It was
In the sense you did everything by by suitcase and movement almost.
I was his kind of, he said, look, I need a kind of alter ego. I need someone that can help me put together this show, because public television, maybe still, but certainly at that time, was not fat with staff and resources. I mean, we were lean and hungry, and it really was Bill and me and Jack Samuel, the director, and 2 or 3 producers and some terrific independent producers, and that was about it. And I, a month later, was on the plane with Bill, going to London, to interview Helmut Schmidt and Giscard d'Estaing and some of the prominent people playing a role on the international stage. And for me, a lawyer in New York, I never looked back.
When did you move into Night Watch, and how did that happen?
It happened, I was the lucky man again. I mean, I've been very lucky to have people offer me interesting things. I was with a friend of mine named Pete Dawkins, who was an extraordinary young general who had left the military, went to West Point, was an All-American Heisman Trophy winner, and I was going to have dinner with him in New York, and he said, look, there's a party at Gene Rather's house, and I called Gene and told him that I was bringing you, a friend of mine, and so would you stop by and pick up Judy, his wife, and I'll meet you there. And so we went there, and Van Gordon Sauter, then the president of CBS News, was there, and he knew me from a television show I had done in Texas, and he said, what are you doing there? And I explained to him what I was doing in Washington, and he said, come talk to me tomorrow. And I thought he was just being nice. And then an hour later, he said, I'm serious about this. And this is Ed Joyce, who's my number 2 man at CBS News. And a month later, I signed up for 6.5 wonderful years at CBS.
You've had some very interesting experiences meeting some very famous people in that Night Watch series. Did you film those during the day, or do you actually?
Yeah, that's the secret, yeah.
The only way you could do it. But now, you said about Colin Powell, for example, that whatever leadership is, whatever it is that makes a leader, he's got it.
Yeah.
What made you see that in him? What was there about the general?
I've been to dinner at his house with people of which much smarter than I am. And he had the capacity in those dialogues and those conversations. You could see how he could weigh opinions of different people and then know instinctively how to go to the heart of the issue. and how to present it to people with divergent views in a way that people kind of looked to him. There was a sense of, with Secretary of Defense there, former Secretary of Defense was at one dinner, I know. There was a quality of judgment and wisdom that came through, one. And two, you could tell that people kind of looked to him. There was a presence that he had. He's intelligent, he's experienced, he is not, he has a bearing about him, and also a human touch. He's not a man, you know, who seems to be of pretense.
Mm-hmm. He's a good illustration of the military man that's become a great public political figure here in the last 6 months.
Yeah, there are polls that say he ought to be on the Republican ticket.
Well, you know,
I don't know that he's a Democrat, Republican or Democrat. I think he's
I don't think anybody knows right now, and that's the big mystery, of course. But on the issue of leadership, and as you characterized him now, a lot of people worry about what we have in our country today. You've studied people all your life. Are you nervous about the quality of leadership?
In my home state, even. And this is not a comment on who's there. It is a comment on who's not there. Mm-hmm. I worry that the best, I don't want to use the phrase best and brightest, but people with a commitment to the country who care about the republic are not engaging in politics by offering themselves or participating. One is that these other fields are very attractive to them: business, journalism, the law. Yet at the same time, they look at what happens to politicians and they see the nature of coverage today and they say, why should I do that? Do I want to put my family under that kind of microscope? And so they're not entering public life, and I think the nation and certainly localities are the lesser for it. I cite you as one example.
All age groups?
Yes, sir.
You see this, young people particularly?
You bet. They're not. There is, I think, in this decade, I'm encouraged by whatever the 80s was, with junk bonds and the age of greed. There seems to be in the 90s, from a limited perspective as we're in 1991, more of a commitment to a different value system than there was during the 1980s. Don't you see that a little bit?
Yes, I
and that's encouraging.
agree with that. You had some very interesting words about Lech Walesa, the Polish leader. And
now the Polish president.
He struck you as such a different type of political figure. What was it?
He looked like we talked about people that work in filling stations. I mean, to see him, you would think that he is just of the people. But there was a kind of a rawness about him, and a power, and a sense of integrity, and also a human touch. I remember when we went to Philadelphia to do this interview, and he was having breakfast there, and he came in, and someone on my staff had a camera, and he went and grabbed the camera and handed it to someone else, and there was a young person that had been traveling with him as a kind of guide or something. He immediately pulled her over to have their picture taken. And it was my camera, and I'm sure that this is the nicest thing that's ever happened to her, and I guarantee you that picture is somewhere on her mantle with a great sense of pride, because here's a man, you know, who leapt over the fence, and probably, as much as anyone, began what we now see unfolding in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union.
As you look at the European nations, and based upon your prior experience with Stang and other leaders you've known, is he a manifestation of a new generation?
Who is that?
Lech
Walesa?
Or you see it in Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, or wherever? What's going to happen?
I think he's sui generis. I mean, I think he's unique because of the role he played at a specific time in his country. I mean, he's almost like George Washington, I think, there. You look at Havel in Czechoslovakia.
A poet.
And he's a poet, but part of men and women who were part of a resistance to the regime, and I think they signal the new leadership in Eastern Europe. And it's interesting to watch it, because sometimes people who were part of the regime, as we've seen in places like Romania, you know, now are in power, and they're beginning to question, where were they 10 years ago, and can we be sure of where their heart is now?
You've done the anchor job on CBS News, too, and among the many things you've done. What about the news media now, and network television particularly, the economics of it, Charles?
Well, I worry
what's happening?
I worry about it a lot. I mean, I think they do. Even people who are executives who are forcing these cutbacks at NBC, at ABC, at CBS. I mean, it's painful to see someone like Joan Snyder, a wonderful woman, who's been at CBS for years, worked for Walter Cronkite, for Dan Rather, for Mike Wallace, and a valued colleague, was just one of those people at age 55, and this was in the story recently I read in the LA Times, just laid off. I mean, she's been a real part of that CBS team, and she helped make CBS a Tiffany network. She's a victim of economics, not of cruelty, but of economics. Network news is no longer, has the protection. Frank Stanton protected CBS News, and they didn't really have to worry about layoffs. They had to worry about how good are we. And there were times in which the mood of the country affected CBS News, but Stanton and Paley protected them for the most part. I mean, Murrow, you know, a North Carolinian, would quarrel with some of that, I think, because he felt like he didn't have enough time to do the kinds of broadcast that he'd made his career for. But for the most part, except for that pressure of the dollar and the revenues that ads brought to them, the CBS News was protected. It's not protected anymore. And when they come to cut expenses, they look to the news to pay its fair share. And I worry about democracy, and I worry about how much those programs that all the networks do, what impact this tightening is going to do. Because it's not so much that you are not going to be at a Tiananmen Square, it's just, can you do it as well if you don't have the same number of people?
Is time to tell a story getting to be that important too? The crush of the economics, requiring more advertising, requiring more encroachment.
Bill Moyers tells a great story to me once. I think Bill Paley had promised him, or had understood that he was going to give Bill a primetime show. Here, Bill, who's one of the favorites in public television, and Bill told me a story once that Mr. Paley said, "Bill, I can't afford to do it anymore. I can't give you that 30 minutes that I thought would be available for us for a Bill Moyers Journal on commercial television, because the time is too precious." What I wonder about and what I worry about is whether CNN, as wonderful as it is, how the networks will adjust to the change. No longer do you come home at 6:30 or 7 o'clock to watch just the evening news. Most of us know, because of CNN and other media, we know more about what's going on by the time we get home. And so those units, which really were crucial to network news, don't play the same role, and the networks have to rethink what their role is.
So you'll have newscasts more often, probably.
You bet, you bet. And more news programs. 48 Hours is a terrific program. 2020 is a terrific program. Nightline is a terrific program, I hope to be able to create a program that will,
Well, I was going to say, I don't think CBS News is going to drop Charles Kuralt anytime soon on Sunday morning.
Not without America rising up.
He's an institution. Well, you are
Rising
yourself.
up.
And you had created
I'm
that.
a minor little institution
but
compared to him.
You had created that in Night Watch. And you ever have a serious disappointment in a personality you were interviewing? I mean, you find people who, when you get them on television, they're quite different than the way they are in the public.
You could answer that as well as I could.
You know how they freeze.
They never are exactly the way. I mean, some exceed what you'd think. And part of what I think this business is about, if you do what I do and what you do, and you do it as well as anyone, it is reading people so that you understand what it is that makes them tick, and then you can try to help them be themselves and bring out what it is that makes them the talent that they are. I mean, I've had as much fun interviewing composers, people like Aaron Copland and others, the late Aaron Copland, who were magnificent if you could tap into their passion for Windsor. Even with an interpreter, you knew how he felt about democracy and the challenge facing Poland. And I mean, it came through. There were other people, and you asked for the disappointments, that I was always disappointed that I couldn't, for some reason, read them, and I didn't know whether, for example, I never was able to do a terrific interview with Governor Dukakis during the campaign. I mean, it was okay, but I never felt like that I had reached in and understood who this man was and his vision and his dreams for America. We saw a little bit of it at that acceptance speech in Atlanta, but I wasn't able to tap that in an interview.
Your conversation with Jimmy Carter won you a major national award. Did you find you really got to know him?
Well, now, I produced that. Bill Moyers was the anchor of that, although I've interviewed
Well, it was
President
your
Carter a number of times, and Bill gave me a lot of credit for that, and I did. And Bill opened that interview by saying, you know, take me back to your boyhood in Plains, Georgia. And I think Carter later said to me, and Mrs. Carter said to me, Carter said, I was tired, it was the end of a long day, he'd been in Pennsylvania, we taped it in Washington. And he said, all of a sudden, I just felt fatigue lifting from me. And he began to think about, and he began to think out loud, and he began to remember fishing, you know, as a kid. And he began to remember his father. Let me tell you one quick story, if I can,
Sure.
which says something about being in North Carolina for me, and I've remembered this story. Carter told Bill this story, and has told me subsequently. He went back, he was a young naval submarine officer, one of Admiral Rickover's kids, and that meant a lot in the Navy in terms of your advancement, because Rickover was tough in terms of how he chose these people. Very successful career. Plains, Georgia, had gone to the Naval Academy, had a wonderful career, had traveled around the world. He and Mrs. Carter both loved the life. His father was dying, Mr. Earl Carter. He went back to Plains, and he sat there as his father was dying over a 6-month period, took leave from the Navy. And he realized what this one man, this peanut warehouse, had done to touch the lives of a small community. And he said, I realized that when my dad died, it meant something to people. He had touched lives in a real way. Jimmy Carter then left the Navy and came back and took over his father's business and established himself in Plains. And I have felt the joy of that experience without any comparison between President Carter and me, but the sheer sense of how important it is to be connected, that we're all part of a flow of history, and somehow that I stand on my father's shoulders, who stood on his grandfather's shoulders, and what that land had meant, to come here and be part of that has been an important lesson for me.
You know, ideas get carried out because of people and leaders.
Yeah.
Now, you've been through 2 great periods in American history, the integration of this country and the liberation of women in politics and other things, so to speak. What do you think is really yet to be done? Has the country really mastered this through its leadership?
No, it's neither, I don't think. And I think I don't, in a very significant way, neither. More so, I think, more progress on sexism than even racism, I believe. I sat with great joy watching what happened to women in the Gulf, where being there and what they contributed to our effort there said, I think, a lot, sent a longer message than any legislation ever did. Racism worries me a lot. It worries me because it's there, and it's there in terms of the competition, the economic competition in America. And when people began to worry about their own pocketbook, then, and I'm not sure that's a new argument, then it rears its ugly head. And I think what is missing is the right kind of leadership across the board, you know, and in terms of both parties. And also the role that we ought to play in the media, you and me and Bill Moyers and all the people we've talked about, CBS News and CNN, you know, to make sure, you know, that these, I looked at last night, I made a speech, I don't know how much time I've got, but I made a little talk to honor students in Granville County. And I just felt 30 years after I'd left high school, what joy it was to see black faces and white faces and see some performance and see them sitting side by side and see, you know, and it reminded me as I watched that speech of Martin Luther King's famous speech at the March on Washington, when he dreamed of little white boys and little black boys. And so there's progress, but this economic thing is what scares me the most. And the generation of young people that we may be losing because of drugs in the high schools and the violence that it begets.
Now, seeing all that you see and being such a student of it yourself, what's up for you for the next 2 or 3 years? Here you are at the maximum of your life power. I don't know where you're going now.
My friends in Granville County would say, this boy's got a lot more to learn about farming.
I'm sure it's true. But it's fun.
It is fun. I'm in the process of having serious conversations with my colleagues at the networks and former colleagues and Bill Moyers and others about creating a program that's an extension of my own curiosity. I mean, I see this show that I've watched many, many times as a reflection of your curiosity about North Carolina people. And I think that the best television has that at its core, as Bill's show does and other shows, sort of the vision and curiosity of one person, the man or woman who is at the center of it, who's at the top of a reflection of a lot of people who work to put together a show. And I hope sort of to find that kind of vehicle and see if I can get back on stream. My friends say to me, aren't you getting tired of the farm? I say no, but I'm getting tired. I'm eager to get back to being part of this sort of, as I say, the conversation of America.
As you looked at that group last night, those wonderful, eager faces that you saw, is there a connection, and can there be some way with all this work that you get done, Bill gets done, where someday in the future we can make that available even at that level for these young people to experience?
Well, I sure hope so, and you know much more about that than I do, and it seems to me that the challenge for us is to take this technology and figure out a way that we can make it available and make it have the kind of impact that it ought, that the promise of television. Remember Ed Murrow said once, that unless we understand and appreciate this medium, it'll just be, wires in a box.
We've got about 60 seconds left. How do you feel about our country now from what you've seen, felt, and know?
Optimistic.
As a global leader.
Yeah. I think we're the only superpower now, that's clear. I think that the challenge, the economic challenge, to make sure that we have the resources to continue doing, that there is an opportunity now because of what's happening in Eastern Europe, what's happening in the Soviet Union, to exercise the kind of leadership. And more importantly, I think, is to apply the kind of effort that prevailed in the Persian Gulf to rebuilding the structure of our country here at home, dealing with the problems that you have dealt with of athletics in America, the relationship between athletics and television and athletics and learning at these institutions. All of those issues cry out for the same kind of imperative commitment.
Thank you, Charles, for joining me. It's a real treat to see you again. And
it's nice to see you.
We'll all be watching and waiting for that next show, and we're so proud of you.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Production of North Carolina People is made possible by a grant from Wachovia Bank, a symbol of strength, stability, and service for over a century.